My name is Chloe, and I'm 32 years old. Standing on my parents' porch that Christmas Eve with my arms full of carefully wrapped presents, I never imagined my own mother would look through me like I was a complete stranger. When she opened that door and said those words, "Sorry, I think you have the wrong house," my whole world shattered. The wreath I'd made in high school still hung there mocking me. Dad appeared behind her with that same blank expression, and the door closed softly in my face while snow fell on my designer coat. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're celebrating Christmas this year. If this story resonates with you, please like and subscribe to hear how I discovered the shocking truth behind my family's betrayal. 3 months before that devastating Christmas Eve, anyone looking at my life would have thought I had everything figured out. I'd just been promoted to senior consultant at one of the most prestigious tech firms in Seattle, pulling in six figures and finally feeling like all those years of sacrifice were paying off. But what most people didn't see was the weight I carried for my entire family. For 5 years, ever since Dad's factory closed down during the recession, I'd been the one keeping everyone afloat. Every single month, $2,800 left my account for my parents' mortgage. Their utilities, groceries, insurance, everything had my name attached to the payments. I told myself this was temporary, just until Dad found something new, but temporary had stretched into half a decade. My brother Jake was 28 and still living in our parents' basement, supposedly launching his music career. Every week brought a new request for a small loan that we both knew would never be repaid. "Just need 300 for new strings, Chloe. This amp will change everything, I promise." The equipment gathering dust in that basement could have stocked a professional studio, all purchased with my money, while Jake slept until noon and played video games. Emma, my 26-year-old sister, had been in nursing school for 4 years. Somehow a 2-year program kept extending and her expenses kept multiplying. She had 3 of my credit cards in her wallet, supposedly just for textbooks and school supplies. But I'd see the charges from Nordstrom, Sephora, expensive restaurants downtown. When I questioned her, she'd tear up about the stress of her studies, how a little retail therapy kept her going. Every Sunday I'd drive 45 minutes to my parents' house with a trunk full of groceries. I'd cook dinner for everyone, listening to them complain about their struggles while I stood at the stove after working 60-hour weeks. Mom would pat my hand and call me their rock. Dad would joke that at least one of his kids turned out responsible. Jake would already be asking what I was making next week, and Emma would be scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing Mom some expensive purse she desperately needed. The praise felt good, I won't lie. Being the successful one, the responsible one, the one everyone could count on, it gave me purpose. When Mom would introduce me to her church friends as the daughter who saved them, I'd feel that warmth of being needed. When Dad would tell his golf buddies about his daughter, the consultant, his chest would puff with pride. Marcus, my boyfriend of 2 years, saw it differently. "Baby, they're bleeding you dry," he'd say after another Sunday dinner where I'd spent $200 on groceries and left with a list of new financial requests. "Your brother is almost 30 and has never held a job for more than 3 months. Your sister has been in a 2-year program for 4 years. Your parents are young enough to work but choose not to." I'd defend them every time. Family helps family, Marcus. They raised me, sacrificed for me. When you love people, you don't keep score. He'd shake his head but hold his tongue, though I could see the frustration in his eyes when I'd cancel our date nights to deal with another family emergency. The exhaustion was bone deep, but I pushed through. When my company holiday party conflicted with helping Mom prepare for Thanksgiving, I didn't hesitate to skip it. My boss had pulled me aside the next Monday, mentioning how my absence was noticed by the senior partners. I'd apologized and promised better attendance, knowing I'd make the same choice again. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Dad had casually mentioned the roof needed replacing. $20,000 minimum, but don't worry, we'll figure something out. His eyes had found mine across the table, and the weight of that expectation sat heavy on my shoulders. I'd already started calculating how many extra clients I'd need to take on. The tiredness went beyond physical. It was the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, the kind that lived in your bones and made you old before your time. Some mornings I'd sit in my car in the parking garage at work, needing 5 extra minutes to put on the mask of someone who had it all together. My colleagues envied my success, not knowing that every raise, every bonus disappeared into the black hole of family needs. But I kept going because that's what good daughters do. That's what love looked like in my family, measured in dollar signs and sacrifice. I'd been taught since childhood that my worth was tied to what I could provide, and I'd learned that lesson too well. October brought the first signs that something was shifting in my family, though. I was too buried in work and worry to really notice. The family group chat, usually buzzing with requests and daily updates, would go mysteriously quiet whenever I'd join. I'd see the typing indicators dancing, then suddenly stop when my name appeared online. One evening at my parents' house, Jake's girlfriend Brittany had been mid-sentence about their plans when she suddenly stopped. After Chloe's gone, we can finally... Jake had elbowed her hard, and she'd covered with a cough, but those words stuck with me. Gone where I wasn't planning any trips. Emma had started acting strangely too. I'd walked into her room to drop off some packages that had been delivered to my apartment, and she'd slammed her laptop shut so fast she nearly broke it. Just school stuff, she'd said, but her face was flushed and her hands were shaking. The packages turned out to be designer shoes charged to my card naturally. My parents' behavior shifted in subtle ways. Phone conversations that had been happening in the kitchen moved behind closed doors. When I'd walk in, voices would drop to whispers, then stop entirely. Mom would smile too brightly and ask about work, but I could feel the weight of interrupted conversations hanging in the air. Thanksgiving dinner should have been my wake-up call. The whole family kept exchanging these meaningful looks over my head, like they were all in on some secret joke. When I'd ask what was funny, everyone would suddenly become very interested in their turkey. Mom had been unusually interested in my financial situation, asking specific questions about my savings account, my investment portfolio, even my retirement fund. Dad, who had never shown interest in finances beyond asking for money, suddenly wanted to know about my stock options at work. How exactly does vesting work, Chloe? What happens to those if you leave the company? His questions felt rehearsed, like someone had coached him on what to ask. Jake had made a joke that landed wrong. Must be nice having all that money while the rest of us struggle. The table had gone silent, Emma kicking him under the table. I'd laughed it off, reminding him that my money was the only reason he wasn't homeless. But the bitterness in his voice was new. Emma had chimed in with her own commentary. Some people just have all the luck. Being smart must be so easy. This from the girl whose tuition I'd been paying for 4 years, whose car insurance was in my name, whose entire wardrobe was funded by my credit cards. A few days after Thanksgiving, I'd found a receipt in Mom's purse while looking for gum. It was from the most expensive steakhouse in town, dated the previous week when Mom had told me she was too sick to meet me for lunch. The bill was for 6 people, $300 paid cash. Where had that money come from? The house had new furniture in the living room. When I asked about it, Dad said they'd found it at a garage sale, but I recognized the Ashley furniture tag still attached under the cushions. The 70-inch TV that had replaced their old one was explained as a Black Friday deal, though neither of them had mentioned going shopping. Jake had new recording equipment that would have cost at least $5,000. When I confronted him about it, he claimed he'd been saving up, though, just the week before he'd asked me for grocery money. The Martin guitar leaning against his bedroom wall was worth more than most people's cars. Emma's designer bag collection had exploded. Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton, all authentic from what I could tell. Her explanation was that she'd been reselling things online, but her laptop history told a different story when I'd checked it while fixing her computer. Charge after charge to luxury retailers, all on supplementary cards linked to my accounts. The family dinners became increasingly uncomfortable. Conversations would be in full swing when I walked in, then suddenly everyone would stop talking. The silence was so obvious, it felt like walking into a wall. They'd scramble to fill it with meaningless chatter about weather or sports, but the damage was done. My Uncle Terry had called me out of the blue in early December. Just wanted to check that you're doing okay, Chloe. Really okay. When I'd pressed him on why he'd gotten evasive. Just remember you've got other family who cares about you, all right? The call had left me unsettled for days. My cousin Lisa had sent an equally cryptic text. "Stay strong, cuz. You're going to need it." Heart emoji. Prayer hands emoji. When I'd asked what she meant, she'd claimed it was meant for someone else, but I knew Lisa didn't make mistakes like that. Despite all these red flags waving in my face, I doubled down on trying to help. When Dad mentioned needing a medical checkup he'd been putting off, I'd immediately scheduled him with the best internist in the city, prepaying for a full panel of tests. Mom's dental work that she'd been complaining about for months, I'd handled that too, $5,000 for crowns and bridges. The Christmas preparations consumed me. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect holiday for my family, determined to make it special despite the weird tension. Photo albums for each family member chronicling our happiest moments. Expensive gifts carefully chosen for each person's interests and needs. I'd even taken time off work, my first real vacation in 2 years, to make sure everything was perfect. Looking back, the signs were all there, bright as neon. But when you're programmed from birth to be the caretaker, the provider, the responsible one, you don't see the trap until it's already snapped shut around you. December 24th started with such promise. I'd woken up at dawn, too excited to sleep like a kid on Christmas morning. The presents I'd spent weeks selecting and wrapping were arranged perfectly in my living room, each one a testament to how well I knew my family. Mom's perfume from that boutique in Paris she'd mentioned once 3 years ago. Dad's signed baseball from his favorite player's rookie year, authenticated and framed. Jake's professional grade recording interface that would finally give him studio-quality sound. Emma's latest MacBook Pro for her nursing school studies. $3,000 in gifts, but that wasn't the real present. The real gift was the photo albums I'd spent 2 months creating, one for each family member. Every birthday, holiday, vacation milestone carefully preserved and annotated with handwritten notes. Mom's album included her wedding photos I'd had, restored pictures of her parents I'd tracked down from distant relatives. Each album was a love letter to our shared history. The cookie tins were packed with Grandma's secret recipe sugar cookies, the ones that took 3 days to make properly with the dough resting between each step. I'd made 8 dozen decorated with the same frosting roses Mom had taught me when I was 7. The kitchen still smelled like vanilla and butter. By 4 in the afternoon, my SUV was loaded like Santa's sleigh. The drive from Seattle to my parents' house in Tacoma usually took 45 minutes, but the snow had started falling heavy and thick. I didn't care about the weather, though. Nothing was going to stop me from making this Christmas perfect. I called Mom from the road. Almost there, just passing through Fife now. Should be there in 15 minutes. There was a pause on her end, longer than normal, before she responded. "Oh, you're coming tonight? I thought Christmas was tomorrow." The oddness of her response barely registered through my excitement. "Of course I'm coming tonight, Mom. It's Christmas Eve. We always do presents on Christmas Eve." The snow was coming down harder as I pulled into their neighborhood. Every house was lit up with Christmas lights, except for ours, which seemed strange since Dad loved decorating. But when I turned into the driveway, I could see the tree through the front window, fully decorated and surrounded by people. The driveway was full of cars. Jake's beat-up Honda, Emma's Corolla that I'd co-signed for, but also Aunt Patricia's Lexus, and another car I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see everyone gathered around the tree. Jake's girlfriend Brittany was there, laughing at something Dad was saying. Emma's boyfriend Todd, who I'd only met twice, was helping himself to cookies from a tray. Aunt Patricia was sitting in my usual spot on the couch, the one closest to the tree where I always distributed presents. They were having Christmas without me. The family I'd supported for 5 years, the people I'd sacrificed everything for, were celebrating without even waiting for me to arrive. But surely it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they were just getting started early. I grabbed the first load of presents and walked to the front door, juggling boxes while trying to knock. The laughter inside was loud enough to hear through the door. Mom's distinctive laugh, the one that meant she'd had a few glasses of wine. Jake's booming voice telling some story. The sounds of my family being a family complete without me. The knock echoed in the sudden silence that followed. Footsteps approached the door, Mom's familiar pattern of walking. The door opened, and there was my mother wearing the Christmas sweater I'd bought her last year. Her face was flushed from wine and warmth, but when she saw me, something changed. Her expression went completely blank, like she was looking at a stranger. "Sorry, I think you have the wrong house." The words didn't make sense. I stood there, presence starting to slip from my arms, trying to process what she'd said. "Mom, it's me. It's Chloe, your daughter. I live in Seattle. I called you 15 minutes ago to say I was almost here." Her face remained impassive, almost bored. "No one by that name lives here, dear. You must be confused." The dear was said like she was talking to someone trying to sell her something polite but distant. Dad appeared behind her, and relief flooded through me. Surely Dad would clear this up. But when his eyes met mine, they were just as empty. "Helen, who is it?" he asked Mom. Not me. He was looking directly at me, but asking her who I was. "Just someone lost," Mom replied. "These developments can be confusing in the snow." She was already closing the door. The presents fell from my arms into the snow. The iPhone box for Emma hit the ground with a crack. The cookie tins scattered, one popping open and spilling Grandma's cookies into the slush. Mom glanced down at the mess with complete disinterest and shut the door in my face. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Through the window, I watched my family return to their celebration. Jake picked up a present from under the tree, one I hadn't wrapped, and started opening it. Emma was taking selfies with her boyfriend in front of the tree. Dad had his arm around Mom, both of them smiling like they'd just won the lottery. My legs moved without conscious thought, carrying me back to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before managing to get inside. The engine was still warm, the heat blasting, but I felt frozen from the inside out. The remaining presents in the back seat seemed to mock me, all that careful selection and wrapping for people who just pretended I didn't exist. I sat in that driveway watching my family through the window like a scene from someone else's life. There was no confusion on their faces, no one asking where I was. They weren't looking for me or wondering why I hadn't arrived. They were simply having Christmas complete and whole without me. The snow kept falling, covering my footprints to the door, erasing any evidence I'd been there at all. Just like my family had erased me from their celebration, from their lives, from their hearts. The presents scattered in the snow looked like garbage now, which I suppose they were. Just like I was to them. My phone rang at exactly 6:47. Jake's name on the screen made my heart leap with hope. Maybe it had all been some horrible prank, some misguided joke that had gone too far. I answered immediately, my voice barely a whisper. "Jake, don't be upset, but you know we couldn't let you in." His voice was casual, like he was explaining why he'd eaten the last slice of pizza. Not apologetic, just matter of fact. "Understood." The word came out hollow, automatic. What else could I say? My brain was still trying to process being turned away like a stranger. Jake seemed relieved by my response. Good, good. I knew you'd understand eventually. You're smart like that. Listen, I gotta get back. Mom's bringing out the pie." He started to say goodbye, and I heard the phone shift like he was pulling it away from his ear. But he never hit the end button. The phone stayed connected, and suddenly I had a window into the room I'd just been denied entry to. Jake's voice, slightly muffled but clear enough, called out to the others. "She bought it completely. Did you see her face? She actually thought we'd let her in." Emma's laughter rang out cruel and bright. "Oh my God, the presents everywhere. Like we'd want any of that guilt gift garbage. She probably spent thousands trying to buy our love. Too bad money can't fix being a selfish witch." Mom's voice cut through whine, making her louder than usual. "He still thinks helping with rent means he's automatically included. Can you believe the entitlement? We raise her, sacrifice everything, and she thinks throwing money at us makes her family." My brain stuttered on that. Did she mean me? But Dad's voice clarified the confusion. 3 years of planning finally paid off. Once we get the rest of the trust fund transferred, we can finally cut her off completely. Trust fund? What trust fund? My grandma had died when I was 15, and I'd never heard anything about money being left behind. Jake's voice came back clearer. He must have put the phone in his pocket. She has no idea about the trust fund. Mom and Dad have been collecting her portion for years, $400,000, and she never even questioned why Grandma's estate took so long to settle. The room erupted in laughter. Emma chimed in with more details. Once we get her to sign the papers thinking it's something else, maybe something about the house repairs, we'll have access to the rest. She's so eager to help, she'll sign anything we put in front of her. Brittany's voice was uncertain. You guys are cold. This is really messed up. Jake's response was sharp. She can afford it. Do you know how much she makes? 6 figures and no kids, no real responsibilities, except what she chooses to take on. She'll be fine. Mom's voice turned philosophical in that drunk way. We deserve this after raising her. Do you know how much it cost to put her through college? How much we sacrificed? She owes us everything she has. But you didn't pay for my college. I wanted to scream. I had student loans I'd just finished paying off last year. They hadn't contributed a dime to my education. The conversation continued, each word a dagger. They discussed selling the house using the profit to move to Florida. They'd been planning this for 3 years, slowly gathering information about my finances, my accounts, my credit. Emma had already filed paperwork claiming I'd been financially abusing them, controlling them with money. Jake had opened business credit lines in my name for his music studio. Not the home studio I thought he had, but an actual commercial space he'd been renting for 2 years. The equipment he'd been buying wasn't for personal use, but for a business that was hemorrhaging money. Emma's nursing school had ended 2 years ago. She'd dropped out but kept collecting the money I sent for tuition, using it to fund her lifestyle while she posted as an influencer on Instagram. The studying she was always doing was actually managing her social media presence, using my money to create a fake luxury lifestyle. Patricia laughed about something, and then I heard the most devastating part. The smart one wasn't so smart after all. Too busy trying to be perfect to see what was right in front of her. Mom's voice clear and cruel. She actually thought we loved her. As if anyone could love someone so controlling and condescending. By New Year, we'll be set for life, Jake said. The paperwork's already filed. If she tries to fight it, we have 3 years of documentation showing she was controlling us with money, forcing us to live how she wanted. The call lasted 23 minutes. I sat in my car in complete silence, my phone recording everything automatically through my dash mount. 23 minutes of my family dissecting my life. My choices, my love for them, like it was something diseased that needed to be removed. They talked about my childhood, how I'd always been too serious, too responsible, no fun. How they'd had to pretend to like me to be proud of me, when really they'd been embarrassed by my try-hard nature. Mom admitted she'd lied about Dad's factory closing. He'd retired early with a full pension, but they'd seen an opportunity to get more from me. The recording finally cut off when Jake must have realized his phone was still on. The last thing I heard was Mom saying they should take a family photo for their Florida real estate agent to show what respectable people they were. I sat in that car until the windows fogged completely and the snow had covered my windshield. The recording sat in my phone like evidence of a murder, which in a way it was. The death of every illusion I'd had about my family, about love, about my place in their lives. By 7:30, I was sitting in Marcus's apartment, my entire body shaking while he played the recording for the 3rd time. His face had gone from confusion to anger to pure rage. They stole $400,000 from you. They've been planning this for 3 years. Chloe, this is criminal. This is literally fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. The lawyer in him had taken over, and I was grateful for it. I couldn't think straight, couldn't process the enormity of what I'd learned. But Marcus was already making lists, pulling up websites, making calls even though it was Christmas Eve. His brother was a criminal attorney who owed him a favor. His college roommate worked in banking fraud. His entire network mobilized while I sat wrapped in a blanket staring at nothing. By 8:30, we had a plan. First, the immediate steps to protect myself. I called my bank explaining I'd discovered fraudulent activity on my accounts. The weekend supervisor was surprisingly helpful, especially when I mentioned identity theft and filed a verbal report. Every account was frozen immediately. New accounts were opened in my name only with passwords my family couldn't guess. The credit cards Emma had been using were all canceled within minutes. The customer service rep could see the unusual charging patterns, thousands in luxury goods, charged to supplementary cards. Did you authorize a $3,000 purchase at Balenciaga this morning? No, I did not. That was fraud. The rep seemed almost excited to help, like she'd been waiting for a case this clear-cut. The utilities for my parents' house were all in my name, something I'd done years ago when they claimed credit problems. Pacific Gas and Electric, the water company, the internet service, even the cable. All disconnected effective immediately. The disconnection fees were waived when I explained I was a victim of identity theft. Here's where things got interesting. The house itself, the one I'd been paying the mortgage on for 5 years, wasn't actually in my parents' names. When Dad had claimed credit issues during the refinance, I'd put the house in my name with the intention of transferring it back once their credit improved. But we'd never done the transfer. Legally, I owned their house. Marcus's brother, the criminal attorney, answered his phone despite it being Christmas Eve. After hearing the recording, his response was immediate. This is grand larceny, conspiracy, fraud, and identity theft. You have them dead to rights. That recording is gold. Do you want to press charges? Did my family had stolen from me, planned my humiliation, laughed about my pain? Yes, I wanted to press charges. By 10 p.m., we'd discovered the extent of the theft. Emma had used my social security number to take out student loans totaling $60,000. Jake had opened 3 business credit lines in my name, maxing them out at $100,000 total. My parents had refinanced the house using forged documents, pulling out $200,000 in equity. The trust fund from Grandma was the worst betrayal. $400,000 had been left to be split between the grandchildren. My parents had been named trustees and had simply kept my portion, investing it and living off the returns while I struggled to pay for college, worked 3 jobs, and then gave them everything I earned thinking they were in need. The eviction notice was prepared and emailed to a process server who worked holidays for triple pay. It would be posted on December 26th at dawn, 30 days to vacate the minimum required by law. Marcus wanted me to give them 3 days, but I wanted to be legally bulletproof. At 11 p.m., I sent a group text to my family, the same group chat that had gone silent whenever I joined. My message was simple. Effective immediately, all financial support has been terminated. All credit cards have been canceled. All utilities will be disconnected at 7 a.m. The house you are living in is legally mine, and eviction proceedings have begun. You have 30 days to vacate. The recording of your conversation tonight has been provided to my attorney and the police. Happy holidays to the family who thought I was too stupid to find out the truth. I attached the 23-minute recording and then blocked every number except Jake's, which I kept active in case he said anything else incriminating. Within seconds, my phone started lighting up with calls from unknown numbers. They were using other people's phones to try to reach me. The voicemails piled up quickly. Emma crying about how this was all a misunderstanding. Mom's wine courage evaporating into panic. Dad trying to sound stern and fatherly, demanding I stop this nonsense immediately. Jake's text came through at 11:45. You can't throw us out, it's Christmas. This is illegal. We're your family, Marcus replied from my phone. She can, it's not, and you're not. By midnight, there were 61 missed calls from various numbers. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Terry, who tried to warn me cousins who'd picked sides, neighbors my family had enlisted to reach out. The voicemails ranged from pleading to threatening to crying to raging. One voicemail stood out. It was from Margaret, my grandmother's best friend. Sweetheart, I just heard what happened. I have documents your grandmother gave me before she passed, the real will and trust documents. She was worried something like this might happen. Can you call me tomorrow? We need to talk about getting your inheritance back. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of chaos I'd only seen in movies. By 8 a.m., Jake had left 12 voicemails, each more panicked than the last. The power had been shut off at exactly 7, just as I'd promised. The house had gone from warm to freezing in the December cold. Emma's credit cards had all been declined when she'd tried to buy coffee that morning, leading to a humiliating scene at Starbucks that someone had already posted on social media. The eviction notice had been posted at dawn bright orange and impossible to miss on the front door. The process server had taken photos showing my parents reading it in their pajamas, their faces shifting from confusion to shock to rage. The neighbors had definitely seen it, and in a suburban neighborhood where appearance was everything, the shame was almost worse than the eviction itself. By noon, the family explosion was complete. Aunt Patricia, who'd been so smug the night before, was now calling everyone trying to do damage control. But the recording had already been shared. Marcus's sister, who happened to be friends with half the town on Facebook, had posted a carefully edited version that stayed just within legal bounds, but made the betrayal crystal clear. The church Mom had attended for 20 years, where she'd been on the board where she'd bragged about her successful daughter, was buzzing with the scandal. 3 different church friends left voicemails for me expressing their shock and support. One mentioned that Mom had been collecting money for a medical fund that didn't exist, using my supposed wealth as credibility. Emma's boyfriend Todd had dumped her via text after hearing the recording. His message was brutal in its simplicity. Can't be with someone who would do this to their own sister. Lost all respect for you. Don't contact me again. Emma's influencer career imploded within hours as the recording spread through her social network. Turns out building a brand on luxury and family values doesn't survive evidence of fraud and cruelty. Jake's girlfriend Brittany had not only left him, but had also called me directly. Chloe, I'm so sorry. I tried to warn them this was wrong, but Jake said you were controlling and abusive. After hearing that recording, I realized they were projecting. I'm done with him and that whole toxic family. The extended family was choosing sides rapidly. Uncle Terry, who tried to warn me publicly, posted his support. I told my sister and brother-in-law that this would come back to haunt them. Chloe has been nothing but generous, and they repaid her with theft and cruelty. I stand with my niece. Cousin Lisa went further, exposing more lies on social media. Fun fact, while Chloe was paying their bills, my aunt and uncle took 3 vacations to Hawaii. They posted photos in private Facebook groups thinking Chloe wouldn't see. They've been living large on stolen money for years. The most devastating blow came at 3 p.m. when Margaret Grandma's friend sent me documents via email. The original trust. Grandma's handwritten notes expressing concern about my parents' financial manipulation and records, showing how my parents had convinced her to change the distribution just weeks before she died, when she was heavily medicated and confused. There were also bank records Margaret had somehow obtained, showing my parents had been withdrawing $20,000 a month from the trust, while telling me there was no inheritance. They'd been living on my money while taking my payments, essentially double-dipping into my finances. Marcus's brother had connected me with a forensic accountant who worked through Christmas Day for quadruple rates. By evening, we had a clear picture. Over 7 years, my family had stolen close to $1 million through various schemes. The trust fund, the fraudulent loans, the credit cards, the house equity, and the monthly payments I'd been making. Jake called Marcus's phone at 6 p.m., desperate and defeated. The house was freezing. They'd tried to break in through the back door, but I'd had the locks changed via emergency locksmith. The police had been called by neighbors when my parents tried to force entry, and they'd been given a warning for trespassing. "She's really going to make us homeless on Christmas?" Jake asked Marcus, his voice breaking. Marcus's response was ice cold. "She didn't make you anything. You made yourselves homeless when you stole from her, planned this for 3 years, and then laughed about it. You're lucky she's giving you 30 days instead of having you arrested tonight." Jake's admission came tumbling out. "Mom said we deserved it. She said Chloe owed us for being born, for us having to pretend to love her all these years. Emma convinced us she'd never fight back, that she was too desperate for our approval. We thought she'd just take it and keep paying like always. Mom came from an abusive family," Jake continued. "She learned that love was transactional. She taught us that Chloe was just a resource to be used. I know it's sick now, but when you grow up hearing it every day, it seems normal. Emma was the favorite, I was the baby, but Chloe was just the wallet." The call ended with Jake sobbing, the sound of my 6'2" brother breaking down completely. In the background, I could hear Mom screaming at Dad, Emma wailing about her ruined life and the chaos of a family turning on each other when their scheme fell apart. New Year's Eve found me in my new apartment downtown, boxes still unpacked, but the view of the Space Needle making up for the chaos. The last week had been a whirlwind of legal procedures, paperwork, and revelations. The forensic accountant had traced every dollar, creating an airtight case that my lawyer called a prosecutor's dream. The recovery process had begun immediately. The trust fund was frozen by court order with a judgment requiring my parents to repay every cent with interest. They'd hired a lawyer with what little money they had left, but when he saw the evidence, he'd advised them to settle immediately. $400,000 would be returned, though it would take selling everything they owned. The criminal charges were filed on December 27th. Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse for what they'd done to Grandma in her final days. The district attorney, who happened to be in Marcus's golf club, had taken personal interest in the case. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of familial fraud I've seen in 20 years, he told me. They're looking at serious jail time." Emma's nursing school had already expelled her when they discovered she'd dropped out 2 years ago but continued collecting financial aid using forged documents. The federal student loans she'd taken in my name were being investigated by the Department of Education. She was looking at federal charges on top of the state ones. Jake, in a surprising turn, had agreed to testify against our parents and Emma in exchange for reduced charges. His music studio, it turned out, had been a front for our parents to launder money from the trust fund. He'd been manipulated too, though that didn't excuse his participation. His testimony revealed the full extent of the planning, the family meetings I wasn't invited to, where they'd discussed how to extract maximum money from me. The house sold within a week to a cash buyer, the proceeds going directly to legal fees and restitution. My parents were staying with Aunt Patricia, but that arrangement was already falling apart. Patricia had thought she'd be getting some of the stolen money and was furious to learn it was all being returned to me. My credit had been frozen and was under repair. The 3 credit agencies had flagged all the fraudulent accounts, and while it would take months to fully clear, the path forward was clear. My company had been incredibly supportive when I'd explained the situation. They'd even provided their legal team to help protect my professional assets. The promotion to partner that had been on hold was suddenly fast-tracked. The senior partners were impressed by how I'd handled the crisis, seeing it as proof of my ability to manage complex, high-stress situations. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's betrayal had actually advanced my career. Marcus proposed on New Year's Eve just as fireworks lit up the Seattle skyline. Not because of what happened, he'd said, holding out a ring that had been his grandmother's, but because watching you handle this with such grace and strength confirmed what I already knew. You're the strongest person I know, and I want to build a real family with you, one based on love, not transactions. The engagement ring caught the light from the fireworks, and for the first time in weeks, I felt pure joy. Not the complicated joy that came from family approval or meeting obligations, but the simple joy of being loved for who I was, not what I could provide. February brought unexpected communication from Jake. He'd been in therapy required by his plea deal, but genuinely beneficial. His therapist had helped him understand the toxic dynamics of our family, how Mom's own traumatic childhood had created a cycle of transactional relationships and emotional manipulation. His letter was 12 pages of apology and revelation. He told me about conversations I'd never known about family meetings specifically designed to strategize how to extract money from me, how Mom would practice her guilt trips in the mirror, how Emma kept spreadsheets of my earnings and calculated exactly how much they could take without me noticing. But he also told me about his own pain, always living in my shadow, being told daily that he was the failure while I was the success they had to endure. The resentment had been cultivated deliberately by our parents, ensuring we'd never unite against them. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped me understand them. I chose to forgive Jake, though forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. We began rebuilding a relationship with clear boundaries and expectations. He got a real job, finally using his degree in sound engineering. He was paying restitution monthly, small amounts, but consistent. The brother I'd always wanted was emerging from the wreckage of who he'd been trained to be. Mom and Dad were less fortunate. The criminal trial was set for spring, and their lawyer had advised them to prepare for prison time. Mom had written me a letter through her attorney full of justifications and blame shifting. I was a difficult child, apparently. Too serious, too judgmental, making everyone else feel bad about themselves. She'd done her best with an impossible situation. I didn't respond. Some bridges once burned provide better warmth as ashes than they ever did as connections. Emma had disappeared entirely, moving to Florida to stay with online friends she'd met through her influencer attempts. Last I heard, she was working as a waitress and fighting federal fraud charges related to the student loans. She'd sent one message through a cousin, "I hope you're happy ruining everyone's lives." I didn't bother pointing out who had actually done the ruining. Thanksgiving of the next year was everything Christmas should have been. Marcus and I hosted at our new house a beautiful craftsman we'd bought with my recovered trust fund money. The table was full of chosen family friends who'd stood by me, Marcus's family who'd embraced me immediately, and surprisingly Jake with his new girlfriend, who was nothing like Brittany. Uncle Terry and Cousin Lisa came too, the family members who'd tried to warn me and stood by me when the truth came out. Margaret, Grandma's friend, had become like a grandmother herself, sharing stories of my actual grandmother who'd loved me fiercely and would have been horrified by what her children had done with her legacy. As I stood at the head of the table, looking at faces that reflected genuine love and respect, I thought about the lesson this brutal year had taught me. Family isn't about DNA or obligation. It's about respect, genuine love, and reciprocity. It's about people who see you as a whole person, not a resource to be exploited. The family that had rejected me on Christmas Eve had given me the greatest gift possible, though they'd never intended it. They'd freed me from the prison of obligation I'd built around myself. They'd shown me that my worth wasn't measured in dollars given or sacrifices made, but in the person I was and the love I deserved. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought mattered to find what actually does. My bank account had been drained, my trust betrayed, my heart shattered. But from those ashes had risen a life more authentic and fulfilling than anything I could have imagined when I was desperately trying to buy love that was never for sale because it had never existed. Every Christmas now, I celebrate with people who want me there, not my wallet. People who laugh with me, not at me. People who see my success as something to celebrate, not exploit. And that really is the greatest gift I could have ever received. The irony is beautiful in its completeness. My family thought they were so clever, planning for 3 years to steal everything from me. But in trying to take everything they lost, the only thing that had real value, someone who loved them unconditionally and would have given them anything they needed if they'd just asked with love instead of taken with greed. Now they have nothing, and I have everything that matters. Not because I'm vengeful, but because actions have consequences, and the love you withhold from others eventually becomes the loneliness you're left with. They taught me that family isn't about blood. They taught me that respect can't be bought. They taught me that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who only see you as a means to an end. The last I heard, Mom and Dad were living in a small apartment working minimum wage jobs to pay restitution. Emma was still fighting federal charges. Jake was slowly rebuilding his life, the only one who'd taken responsibility and tried to change. And me, I was living a life filled with genuine love, professional success, and the kind of peace that comes from knowing you're valued for who you are, not what you can provide. That Christmas Eve, when my mother looked through me like I was a stranger and closed the door in my face, she thought she was locking me out. What she actually did was set me free. And freedom, it turns out, was the greatest Christmas gift of all. What would you have done if your own family pretended not to know you on Christmas Eve? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was planning to betray you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding your chosen family. Share this with someone who needs to hear that sometimes losing toxic family is actually winning your life back. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the family you choose is often more real than the family you're born into. Happy holidays to all of you who've learned that real love doesn't come with conditions.